Unfortunately, we all have bosses, and we must know how we have to work with them. So the next presentation is about bosses, and the presenter, the speaker, is László Kónya. László is the CEO of Deutsche Telekom IT Solutions, and he has a staff of a few thousand employees, and he's an enthusiast of digitalization. I think it must be in your job description as well, and he's passionate about emotional intelligence, and he started his career at an academic institute. Which institute it was, László, if it is not a secret?
It was Staki.
Staki, okay.
Hungarian.
Thank you very much.
Academy.
The floor is yours, László.
Thank you very much. I was not prepared that you know these details about me. Thank you for the introduction. The best time slot of the day, right? After lunch. I guess most of you imagine that you will sit here, relax, digest your lunch. Not on my watch, okay? So, and some of you might have been worried that we do a little bit of exercise after the lunch, and you are right, if you were worried. I will have 3 questions to you, and I'm not going for the hands up because after the lunch that's not enough, okay? So I will ask you to stand up for the questions, just a little bit move. I think it's better to have a movement. So first question, not yet, still, I really appreciate that you are so enthusiastic. Great start for the whole story. So first question, how many of you have ever had the task to communicate at CXO level, executive level, project sponsor, top management for your project? So please stand up if you had ever this task to communicate at top management level. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Please sit down. So majority of you had this task already. Then I will refine a little bit the question, okay? It's only 3 questions, no, not much to go. How many of you had been struggling with communicating with top management? Please be honest and stand up again if you have been struggling with communicating. Okay. Many of you are really great in communicating top management. Thank you very much. Sit down. And a last question, how many of you are, as of now, kind of CXO level, so being an executive now, CEO, CTO, CIO, whatever, how many of you are in such position now? Any of you can stand up, please? Okay, great. First of all, today's presentation will not be about you, okay? It's more about, in general, the exec. Thank you very much. This whole story, what I will tell today, initially I prepared the presentation after 6 years ago. At that time I was running our project management team. Between 2013 and 2016, I was the leader of the project management team in our company. And our company, by the way, Deutsche Telekom IT Solutions, is a subsidiary of DT in Hungary. As it was mentioned, we have like 5,000 something employees, and we have 120 project managers delivering globally projects. Some of them are here today. And at that time, I realized that one of our major challenges is that we are not able to sell properly the project results, not able to communicate properly with the sponsors. I had tons of experience in this company and previous companies, how I perceived it should be done. So I prepared a presentation, we have regularly this project management community event, and around 2016, I think, I presented the initial version, not this one. And it was well received by the colleagues. We had a lot of discussions, what to do, how to improve our communication towards the stakeholders, the major stakeholders, project sponsors, CEOs, CIOs, etc. Then, a few years later, I became an executive 5 years ago, first VP level, and beginning of this year, I became a CEO. And I had a kind of misconception, how to say, that when I will sit in that chair, which I've seen from outside quite a lot in the company, I've been here for 12 years, I will be the guy ruling the chaos. So I was always proclaiming about myself that nothing stops by me, everything comes in, goes out, I'm not a bottleneck. And then I suddenly realized that I am. And I realized that this story has 2 sides, and this spring in our PM community, I presented the 2.0 version, seeing the other side of the story, the human story, how these managers, these project sponsors fare through life, and how they are struggling with their different challenges. What I will not be talking today is how a project sponsor should sponsor a project. Okay, so there is tons of materials and tons of trainings and presentations about how to develop project sponsors to be better project sponsors. I'm a bit skeptic on this topic due to two reasons. One of them, that usually when people get into that age of maturity that they are project sponsored, they are quite hard to change. So it's kind of usually at an age like myself when your personality is well developed. And the other side of the coin is that they usually don't have time. We tried together with Laci Balog, who is leading our PM team. Now we try to create project sponsor trainings for our top managers in the company, and regularly failed to get them to the training, failed to get their buy-in because they were saying, okay, but I'm doing it really good. That was their perception. Our perception was different, and we realized that what can you better change? You can change yourself how you deal with these problems. So I decided that we need to take this topic differently. We need to address this and to see and understand better the top managers and the different people sitting in these CXO level seats. What I'm sharing today is, again, not about the CXOs here today, including myself, so it's not about how to communicate with me. It's more about my perception, and I'm still struggling today to communicate with other executives. It's not easy, and you will see why. So, let's start it. First of all, who are these executives I'm talking about? These are the project sponsors from your point of view, from project's point of view, who are usually overwhelmed. Their impact on the project is huge. So if you check, there is tons of literature, how big is the importance of project sponsor. In the break, we're talking one of you about the fact that the project sponsor in many cases has a bigger importance in a project than the project manager itself, because the impact and the decision right are there. So therefore, how the project sponsor is acting in a project, that has really a huge impact on the outcome of the project. So we are talking about, you see here a lot of abbreviations, it doesn't matter. The importance is that they are sitting in a high enough level in the organization, and they are actually owning the responsibility of this project, but usually not only project, but owning given areas, having responsibility for those areas. This is just an estimation, getting 300-400 emails per day. That's my personal experience. Could be very different company by company, but the important is the info flow, what is incoming, is huge. It's so huge that you cannot really deal with all the information coming in. And actually these people, these executives are usually involved in a lot of parallel initiatives. So you have to keep in your mind that these people are not only focusing on your project, but they have constantly their view on several projects. Responsibility is on their shoulders, definitely, so money and delivering the results is always something what is expected from them. And that results to the good old Pareto 80-20 rule. So all these executives try to focus on the 20% which are the most efficient way of spending your time, for the very simple reason that the executives, maybe I change the rhetoric and I say not them, but we. So we as executives, we are simply not able to deal with everything. For myself, everything is continuously falling down from the table. So what I never experienced before, where I always thought that I am the one able to manage the chaos, I'm not able to do anymore in the actual position. And from that moment, I already continuously do prioritization based on importance, and you can see some of the ideas here. Prioritization based on the results. Prioritization based on what activities should I do which have the most influence or most impact on my organization, where we have the highest risk or really strategic importance. And all the other things should go kind of autopilot. They should just run through the organization, and I don't want to care about it. And that should be the normal way of doing it. So now, if we look about how executives spend their time, I found a very interesting article in Harvard Business Review from 2018. Here they analyzed 27 CEOs and 60,000 working hours of these CEOs. This is, by the way, American data, so that's slightly different from Europe in my view, because in America, you know better. I think the understanding of work is a bit different, and 60 hours per week, as here is stated 62, is kind of normal in these positions. In Europe, that seems a bit exaggerated. But anyhow, it's good to understand. So based on this Harvard Business Review analysis, the executives spent almost 10 hours work per weekday. They were working 80% of their weekend days, 3 hours, or almost 4 hours in average, 70% of their vacation days, and altogether 62.4 hours per week, which seems huge, really. The good news is that nowadays, and again this is 4-year-old survey, these leaders realize also the importance of their health, so they spend now at least almost 7 hours per day sleeping and exercising 45 minutes per day. If I compare that to myself, or maybe to European part, so I don't have exact data how many hours I work. I know that I'm working every day on the weekend usually. It's part of my life, how I balance it out. I don't work at all on my vacation, so that's kind of saint for me. And I roughly work, I would say, around 50 hours, which is okay and manageable. I sleep 7 hours and 2 minutes per day. I have exact data from my watch. That's a yearly average, and I train a little bit more than 1 hour per day. So I think it's fitting well. My profile is a bit more positive than this outlook is showing, but on the right side, it maybe is more interesting to see how they spend this time. And as you can see, they are spending 31% of their time on work, then commuting, personal, etc. What's really interesting that 2/3 of their time used to be face-to-face, and the rest is phone or electronic. Again, this is pre-COVID data, so I assume this turned to be face-to-face, maybe in many cases into video conference, but definitely not into email. So I think a lot of top managers still prefer personal communication. I recommend that to you as well. Really large part of their time, you can see core agenda 43%, 36% important unfolding development, that's 79%, almost as I mentioned. So 80% of their time they are spending on important topics, and 20% on have-to-dos, what is like you need to do it, but their importance is less that high. And then you have different length of meetings. I would really recommend to keep them short, by the way. They still have 30-40% of long meetings. So it's good to understand how these stakeholders spend their time. And then if you go further, it's very important to understand them. And we have heard previously very great presentation about stakeholder, partially about stakeholder, but Greta, you mentioned that it's a good question if you want to first understand that stakeholder a little bit, and then meet, or first meet and then understand. It doesn't matter the order in my view, I fully agree. So some of us deal like this or like that, but definitely you need to profile them. You need to get an understanding of these people, because that's the key to everything. And emotional intelligence was mentioned at the beginning. I will come back at the end of that. Emotional intelligence is key to all this topic. There are tons of books about how you can so-called managing upwards in the organization. But the key to all is emotional intelligence, to understand the other person and being able to understand their thoughts, their goals, their needs. Could be through, if you do a research before, through emails, through second-hand information, through personal impression, it doesn't matter. But what is important that you need to understand how their work is influenced, impacted by your project. And what is really important is that all these stakeholders are usually having different goals. And if you understand their goals, then you can better formulate what you want to tell them. You can better influence their decision into the direction you think is the right for the project. You see here, for example, CEOs usually have a strategic overview. They have a kind of strategic roadmap where they want to take the company. This is the most important for them. Finance You all know the finance people, they have usually costs ahead of them, really important financial targets. HR is usually about people first, and so you get a kind of standard profile, but that individual person, usually every of them have their own life, have their own desires, their own plans, and if you understand them, then it's much easier to communicate with them. And the problem usually is that you go into the sponsor meetings, it doesn't matter if it's a regular project meeting, it's a checkpoint, it's whatever, just giving a status to an executive team, you need to try to communicate at their level. And they usually, I found this phrase in the same Harvard Business Review article, that they fly at a different altitude. So they are looking from high, they look a lot of things at the same time, and they cannot look at the same granularity, but they want to see the big picture. And what you tell them it has to be from their point of view. Dear stakeholder, dear project owner, your numbers, your end targets will be influenced by my project in this way, because this is what fits their world, and this is how they understand the impact on their business. And this is how they will, you will get their buy-in for the project results later. If you go in to such meeting with high-profile stakeholders, the first and most important topic is that you need to know what is your goal, what you want to reach. So that's for me a basic kind of negotiation and meeting driving technique. Of course, in every meeting, if you go in as a project manager, you go in with a given goal, with an expectation for yourself and an outcome with the meeting. But with the high-profile stakeholders, this is even more important. That is not just one more meeting, but I go into the meeting and I know what I want to reach. I know my goal, and then you try to build up your roadmap. What do I have to do to reach this goal? The goal could be whatever you want. Maybe you want to sell the project results as successful. The project looks red, but you can still sell that as successful because you put all the effort, and the management will appreciate your effort. So could be any reason or any goal what you want to reach, but it's important that first of all it's clear for you. And then when you go in, it's a very, very strange experience what I realized this year when I stepped into this role, that given the too many things on the table of such position, I personally every week land in at least 2-3 meetings where I have no clue what meeting I'm in. Okay, so I go into the meeting, look around, who are these people, what is the topic, try to check on my phone because I just exited the previous meeting. So this is happening, it seems strange, I could never imagine. My assistant is actually marking my calendar for the strange meetings because you know there are the regular meetings, a weekly executive meeting, weekly project meetings, so where you have a kind of regularity and the persons in the room know what's happening. But there are some other meetings which may be happening in 3 weeks, 1 month, 2 months, and you lost track, and it's marked in my calendar some kind of history and maybe some comments who are the participants, because simply with hundreds of people meeting every day, the info flow is too much. So when you go into this meeting, you need to somehow assess if the people will understand what you say to them or what you tell to them, or you need to express that in more detail. And that's not an easy story because if you over detail at the beginning, then they will look like, come on, I know all the details, why am I explaining that again? So it's not an easy story, but you will fare, but you need to have this problem in your mind that maybe not all the people in the room will understand what is about, what the project is about, where are you, and what will happen. So you can see here at the last, I just make a calculation based on my data. In maybe we had a previous meeting 2 weeks ago, and I got 3,000 emails since then. And referring, like, you remember the email what I sent you 2 weeks ago? Yeah, sure. And the other 3,000 as well. So no chance. I'm happy if I can read the emails that arrived in a day, but in many cases that does not happen. So you need first of all to set the stage. This is, of course, known, and PMI describes it, and everyone knows how to do that. But you need to be aware that even if you send out all the information previously, the people might not read it, and you need to a little bit help them at the beginning to set a bit more the stage for them. You need to be aware what could be interesting for the executives, for the project sponsors. And the first and most of all topic what many times is lost and gets frustration on the executive side, if the presenter starts to present, has half an hour, after 15 minutes, I still don't know if I will have to make a decision or not. Extremely frustrating, because you have a different approach if you know that this is just a status call or status meeting. The project manager just brings in a status, just maybe we need an okay, or just wants to share information, or we need a critical decision at the end. That's a totally different story, because if you need a critical decision, then you need the full attention of that management team, and you need to pre-brief at the beginning. You need to raise that attention at the beginning, that there will be a decision which needs to be made today. And of course, financial aspects are very critical. Even if you don't have financial data, the executives are always thinking about finances. You come in, project idea, first step, no clue about finances, the first idea in the mind of the executive, how much this will cost me. Okay, you are not talking at all about financials, but that's the first thing that comes to the mind, because that's always, the bottom line is always hitting at that level. Obviously, deadlines, major milestones, so everything which is really important within the project could be impacting the overall picture. That's something what the executives are interested. And on the right side is the usual risk management story with the risk assessment of impact and probability, likelihood. All the executives are always thinking about risk. So risk is nowadays something which we are living with it continuously. I really like this never normal phase, what I heard today. So we are in a world where risk management starts to be kind of our basic daily routine, and understanding which risk in which category is and where do I need to take bigger care. That's the major focus on all our projects. And this can turn upside down from one week to the other, because the environment is very volatile. But you always need to come in with the major message that this is the status of the project, and these are the risks what we see, and this is how we deal with these risks. And that's the main story, what is always interesting. Of course, how I already mentioned how this story impacts the revenue, the profit. And again, are we on track? It's not interesting to, so I would even say, coming in with a full green project, to me, is suspicious, and suspicious to many stakeholders. So it's much better to say and show risks of the project, show the project in green, and tell we have issues, I have ideas what to do, or I need your help here or there. To say that we have issues and I have no clue what to do, that's not a good message. To say that we have no issues at all, everything is under control, nowadays I don't believe it in any project. So we don't have any projects nowadays in my company where we have no issues, because you just look at the delivery chain, you look at the resource capabilities all over the world. So every project is bleeding from one point of view, and you need to show that transparently. If you show that in time, and that's one of the key issues here. So the executives are interested to know about the problem early, because if you know the problem early, you can address it easier. And that's the key. If you raise the issues early, then it's much easier to deal with it. Then you will get much more the buy-in of the project sponsor, rather than raising 3 weeks later when the number is 1-0 bigger, or the risk is 1-0 bigger. Then you go into the decision-making phase. So you would like to get a decision from the project sponsor, from the executive team, from the steering board, whatever is on front of your project. First of all, usually these people like to make decisions. Seems a strange statement, but this is why they got into this role, because sitting in a high management role and not liking to make decisions, that's not going to be a sustainable role. I love to make decisions as well, and many of the executives do. There are usually two kinds of executives from this point of view, and I would say the whole story is moving into the second one. So the first one, there are some kind of intuitive leaders who don't need that much data and are eager to make decisions quickly. Rather, let's say again 80-20, make quick decisions without too much data, a large majority hitting the nail. It's less and less these kind of managers. More and more the managers go into the direction and need more data to make a reliable decision and need more data fast. So you want to make a decision, and for that decision you need to present them reliable data. And it's very good if you agree with them how this decision-making process will be done later. Because when the decision has to be made, then it's extremely tough if there are discrepancies or the steerco has different views and you didn't agree if you need majority or anyone can veto the result, etc., etc. So all these things to clarify before, at the beginning in the project charter or when you agree on your communication way, that's really critical. And the third topic, which it comes back later in the presentation, maybe some of what I shared today is not totally in line with the PMI and the PM book. It's just from the experience that it's working. So if you have very sensitive topics to decide, and if you go in front of very kind of big ego executives and try to convince them, and there will be some conflicts between them, that does not look like a good scenario for me. So it's much better to have one-to-one discussions with these executives, trying to explain them more in detail if they have time, if you have time, if you can manage them. Because in these discussions, you can a bit better highlight the topic from their personal view. One-to-one, explain to them. And when the joint discussion comes up later, there is no big ego fight between the executives. I've experienced that a lot of time in different discussions, when different executives sit in a room and they are getting some decision first time in their front. It's very hard to get out a good decision where you get the buy-in of the whole team. And the last one is an interesting topic. Usually when you want a decision means selecting from alternatives, right? By default, that's the definition of decision. If you go into a project meeting and you say, okay, I brought you a decision, the proposal is A, and there is no other alternative, you get it, you vote it yes or no, and if no, then I go back, then you have to go back and work out another one. That's usually not a good way of progressing. So in my experience, it's really good if you can bring alternatives to the table, because then the decision maker can have also the feeling that they can they have the room to decide. Now, the other end is when, and I experienced that a lot of times sitting on the executive side, someone from project side came in, I have 3 alternatives, 1 looking really good, 2 looking so shit that it's no-brainer. And all the executives were sitting like, come on, are we like, kindergarten? So you cannot go in with 3 alternatives, with 2 of them being totally pointless alternatives, because that's annoying, again, the decision-making round. You need to work out that there are at least 2 feasible scenarios, otherwise the decision-making makes no sense. Otherwise, maybe it's better to say, I have no other alternative, just this one, okay? Take it or leave it, or we go back and try to work out something else, or give me some hints what to do. But faking up scenarios, in my experience, was really not working well in the past for me. Now, timing of this story. I already mentioned that the executives like to know about the problems early. And I've seen in our company as well, but I guess it's similar in many other multinational companies, people not being brave enough at the beginning of the projects or the deals, raising their voice, there might be a problem, and later this problem is growing, then just exploding in face of all the project members. So if the executives have the information in time, they can manage that, they can really deal with this situation. And if you run run virtually to your sponsor and tell them first the problem, they really appreciate them. This is again kind of basic trust building manners. I remember when I was a kid and I was like 14, 15, and one of our tests, I tried to cheat. It was really common at that time. The whole class was cheating. I don't know. That year it was kind of fancy to try to cheat on the tests in our class. I'm not proud of it, but I tried it as well, and I failed. The teacher caught me, and so at the very beginning she told me, okay, you need to write it alone without the cheat code, whatever. So I wrote the whole test alone, And when we finished, he said, okay, now I will go to the head of your class, to the teacher who is the head of your class, and I will escalate this issue to him. And she started to gather her papers, and my mind was like buzzing like crazy. And next moment I stand up and I was running to the head of the class across the school, went there and I told him, boss, there is a big problem. I was caught cheating. Please help me. And he turned totally differently the whole story. He was of course not happy, but supporting me all the process. Of course, I got kind of, bad point in my marks. But all in all, he was very supporting and very appreciating that I raised this problem. And it's a school story, but the very similar story happening in your business life. If you go to the big managers and raise their attention in time, even if you are the faulty one, they really appreciate that. Second one, timing, try to make it when they are in a better physical, mental shape. Of course, you can also realize that when you talk to someone, if they are very tired, it's not the most. Sometimes you have a decision where you don't have the time pressure. Maybe you have even weeks to get that decision. And I used to really wait 1 meeting, 2 meetings, 3 meetings, and I saw, oh, now he's happy, okay. And that's the moment when I come with a decision, because that's a mental moment where the sponsor is more open to your proposal, rather than when you go to someone who is tired, stressed, I don't know, family problems at home. That's a totally different mental situation. Last one, this is a little smiley there, because when I presented this presentation 6 years ago, then I said, please, if you send out an email and asking someone to read it, give at least 1 day. I realized that even 3 is not enough. So give enough time to these managers, given their time pressure, to read the materials before the meeting. That's definitely a good action. Now, if you present live, then, of course, number 1 rule is that you need to prepare. You go in mentally, physically, that this will be a tough meeting. Usually these are tough meetings because these are tough people under time pressure. The whole meeting is usually time pressured, and you need to get out with the best result what you want to have. One of the critical things here is, and I experienced that a lot of time, people are coming with a long presentation and they don't get past for the first 2 slides, because some of the executives will immediately start to ask questions, hammering them, first slide, why is that, what, etc. And even you have half an hour and 8 slides, you will get only to slide number 2. You can avoid that, of course, if you get in and ask them, okay, please, I would like to present all the presentation, and you can ask questions afterwards. Sometimes it's working, sometimes not in my experience, but it's really, really important to show the summary at the beginning. It's not a good idea to put a big bang at the last slide, because you will never get to the last slide in an executive presentation. Again, if you have sensitive topics, they were to be discussed a bit before, and don't go into the meeting and try to convince everyone when they have different views, especially if you have a large round of people there. Probably you experience that as well. It's very hard to change mind of executives or higher level managers when there are others in the room. I had that experience many, many times. So when I know that our views is a little bit different, I try first face-to-face, because face-to-face, everyone is behaving a little bit different. In front of a room, they always try to show their authority and that they are a big boss, and it's very hard to change their views. Email is the worst. That's next slide. In email, never try it, but personally try to do it first in person, first one-to-one. And the last one, it's really painful for me, because I had few such experiences in the past. If you go in and you have any flow or any errors in your presentation, they will find it. That's my experience. It's better being prepared for that. You might have errors, of course. Everyone can have errors. Don't try to explain it or mismatch or come up with any false explanation. It's much better to accept and admit that you made an error. These people are sitting in those positions usually, but they are smart enough to point out the errors. So yesterday we had a 4-hour meeting with our big boss from Germany, like 60 slides, on slide number 17, he was looking at one number, okay, we took less people to Hungary than expected, saving is bigger, what is the reason? Everyone, we never realized that it was totally not logic what was on the slide, and he pointed out the exact topic what made no sense, and and in that moment, you cannot say like, I have a hunch or what is here. You have to admit, sorry, we don't know it, you are right, seems false, we will check that. But this is happening regularly. This is something for what you need to be prepared mentally. And when we talk about managing emotions, that's the key in the whole story. So these people, us, let's say, are also human people, but under heavy pressure. So many of these executives tend to be sometimes rude. I try not to be. I have some colleagues here who might contradict me. But the time pressure is really bringing that out from you. This is how humans work. And it's important how you manage all this situation from your point of view and understand that this is not a personal story for these executives usually. First of all, they want to see on your face that you believe what you say, and that's really critical. So if they see on you that I have the full commitment for this project, I do everything, I will die for this project, even the results are bad, they will believe you and they will give you all the green lights to do what you want to do, because they will see in your eyes, they will see in your behavior that they can trust you. The second one, you need to understand their feelings. It's even better to label them, so when you see someone very angry, you can tell them, okay, I got you, I understand that you are now angry, I understand that you are frustrated, I would be in your place, etc. So if you kind of mirror their feelings and tell them that you understand their feelings, that's already bridging the two of you, even if they are getting frustrated by the results. The fact that you understand their frustration, that's helping you bridge a trust between you. The third one, mirroring their words, that's a brilliant technique. I don't know if you ever used it. I used it many times. Just one little story. A few years ago, there was a big decision about a huge project, if we bring that to Hungary or not, and if yes to Hungary, then which department, and we were sitting there with 3 department leads, and the big boss from Germany, a lady, was talking to us and making the decision which department will take this project. In the previous weeks, with my team, we were listening to her speeches, which were available on the internet, which she was doing live, etc., and we were making notes on the vocabulary, what words should I use. So I went into that meeting and was talking on her language. And at the end of the meeting, she said, okay, I see László, you are the guy, okay? You understand what I say, because I was simply using the words that she regularly uses. I mean, this was a really extreme story, and we were preparing for weeks, but it was a huge decision, and later when it started, next year we built up something like 250 people on that department. Turned out to be a huge success story and worth the investment. But mirroring the words, I also read that there was a survey on restaurants checking if a waiter comes to you and you explain what you want, and the waiter will tell, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, or the waiter will repeat what you told them. In the second case, they are getting 70% more tips at the end. Because the customer feels that what I said was fully understood. The yes sir was just a kind of very blank or empty confirmation, and when you get repeated the words, then you see that the other person understood that. So that's also a very nice technique. And the fourth one, I repeated that many times, don't take these stories personally. These people don't take it personally. So there is a very, very lot of personal things running around, and human things around the executives, and they don't want to hurt people, they want to reach results, but they simply don't have time sometimes. Then, active listening, again, a very well-known story, but probably we don't spend enough time. I know that this is my weakness for sure, and regularly getting in the 360s, back that time. When someone is speaking, I already start to think what I will answer, but the right thing is that you try to understand what the other person is telling you, try to repeat it back, reformulate it, ask back, and show the other person that you are listening. That's the main key message here when talk to the CXO level executives, that they see, they told you something very important, and you were listening, and you understood that, and you will use that information on the right way. Now, emails. worst way of communication. We all know that. We cannot avoid it. The first one is, I can't formulate that enough. If I'm getting such a long email, I'm not reading it. When I was, again, going back to my childhood, we had a teacher, a history teacher, and we had an assumption that he's not reading the whole text what you wrote in your exam, just the beginning at the end. And I made even a bet with one of my friends. At the beginning, I started with the history lesson, then I wrote the last Real Madrid-Barcelona game, and then I finished with the history lesson. And I got an acceptable note or mark from the teacher, confirming our theory that he was not reading the middle. Now, the bad news with executives that they are reading at the beginning and nothing else, okay? So they are not scrolling down to the end. So don't put at the end last 3 lines, please help me, bold, underline. No one will scroll down 3 screens. So if you send an email, it should be maximum, I don't know, 4 or 5 lines, structured, really, really nicely put together. You can put in important messages later. There are some really pervert executives who are reading it. I know some in our organization, but it's really rare because they don't have usually time, and this information is lost. Yeah, the last lines maybe, because the time is quickly running out. Don't inform executives about critical info in email. Sometimes it's happening because you have an incident during the night, 2 o'clock, and you need to send out information. Then try to be very concise at the beginning. This is happening, this is how we do what's happening in the first 3 lines. But try to avoid inform them in critical stories in email, and don't argue with a large CC in email because that will not help your success or your career, let's say. Bullshit management. Again, if you are caught on errors, please don't try to fake some solution, be much more honest. When you see that the other side, so the executives try to avoid a decision maker and push you aside with some kind of bullshit, there is a reason of that. They either don't understand what you want, and then you need to rephrase it, you need to re-ask the story, or they don't give a shit, sorry for that, so they don't really evaluate the same level like you, and then you need to go back with further questions and understand why this bullshit is coming from the executive, but don't avoid managing that story. Follow-up, usually, and this was the title of the presentation, that you should sit back and wait the boss will call. It will never happen. I also have here a good practice in general. Of course, you can use all these tools that you send out that if until a given timeline you don't answer, I consider this decided. That's a bit aggressive, sometimes works. What's interesting that when I'm following up some tasks, I usually ask my question, who is interested in this task? If I'm interested, then I'm following up. If you are interested, to whom I give the task, I'm not following it up. For example, if I'm project lead and I give to the sub-project leads bonus opportunity to spread to their people and they get a timeline until Friday, if they don't answer until Friday, and their team is not getting a bonus, okay? Because it's your interest to send me a feedback. Now, this technique is not working with executives because they are out of time, so they usually don't come back even if they are interested. They have the interest in the story. Finishing, because I've run out of time. Again, emotional intelligence, and I have also a book about that. This is a really nice book, this Emotional Intelligence 2.0, how to understand yourself, how to manage yourself in this situation, how to understand and manage others. That is key to all of what I explained today. Thank you very much for your attention.